Thank you and welcome to the show this morning. The topic this morning is the impact of AIDS on African Americans. And we're fortunate this morning to have with us to talk about the impact of AIDS on African Americans, Mr. RCrowder. Mr. Crowder is the founder of an organization called StreetWorks. And not only is he the founder of this organization, but he is also the executive director of StreetWorks. And of course, Mr. Crowder, let me welcome you to the show this morning.
Thank you, Dr. Haney.
And to tell you, Mr. Crowder, how delighted we are to have you again on this show dealing with this issue. As a matter of fact, we've had you about 4 or 5 different times, and each time you bring us excellent information, and people who have an opportunity to see these shows have often remarked how courageous you are in terms of what you're doing and your whole attitude in reference to AIDS. Before we get started into the impact of AIDS on African Americans, Mr. Crowder, let's have you to give us some information about your background, your education, and some of the experiences that you had before you became the founder of StreetWorks.
Okay. My name is RCrowder, as you said, and I'm a native Nashvilleian, grew up in North Nashville. I attended Pearl High. Later on, I attended Tennessee State University, got a degree in accounting. I worked for several AIDS organizations. I worked for Meharry Medical College. I went on to work for an agency called Women. And now I identified a need for further services, and I started StreetWorks. StreetWorks is an organization that does HIV education, prevention, and care. So we actually provide services for those people who are infected with HIV. We're located at 1431 Joe Johnston in the Johnny Rahel housing site. And our hours of operations are specifically 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. So we have outreach workers out on the streets doing HIV prevention and education during the times when the services are mostly needed. And that's during the nighttime hours, since our target population are those who are at the highest risk for HIV infection.
Okay, you talk about HIV and AIDS, Mr. Crowder, and I think we've talked about it on a number of occasions, but still there are some folks who really don't understand what AIDS and HIV is, and give it to us from that perspective so that the average person might understand what we're talking about here.
HIV is an acronym for, an acronym for human immunodeficiency virus. It is the virus which causes AIDS. And there's 3 modes of transmission, and that's blood to blood, which most commonly occurs by sharing needles. We talk about any kind of needles, tattooing needles, body piercing needles. You can get it from sex, you know, unprotected sex with an infected person. Now that's important. One of the persons in the sexual act has to be infected. And the other mode of transmission is an infected mother can transmit the virus to her unborn child. Those are the only 3 ways you can get HIV. And there's 4 body fluids which transmit HIV, and that is blood, semen, vaginal secretions, and breast milk. And what I'm saying here is you have to get one of those body fluids of an infected person into your body. And right now, HIV is impacting African Americans at a disproportionate rate. We account for over half of all new infections. That 1 in 50 African American men is infected with HIV, and 1 in 160 African American women is infected with HIV.
You know, Ms. Crowder, it seems to me, and I think this is the same question that we have to raise, and we've raised it before. It seems to me that if this disease is having such a tremendous impact, why is it that we don't hear that much about this disease, nor do we see that many people who are impacted with this disease? And where are these individuals that, when we say 1 out of 50, where are these individuals, and how do you know, I mean, how can you tell that they...
Well, Dr. Haney, first of all, HIV has such a negative impact associated with it that people it's called stigma. It has that stigma attached to it. So for some reason or another, African Americans has never been able to actually deal with the fact that they could be infected with HIV. I think the news media had a big part in that, when it first came out back in 1981, 82, when we first heard about HIV, it was only said that HIV is affecting gay white men and injection drug users. Well, most African Americans thought then that it was not a disease among African Americans, when they should have identified it as what it was. It was a sexually transmitted disease. So a lot of African Americans doesn't think that they, you know, that it involves them or they are impacted by HIV. So it was a little misleading in the beginning, and therefore we didn't think that it was our problem.
But it is a problem now, you're saying. It's a real problem among
a real problem amongst African Americans. And again, with the stigma that's associated with the disease, that you're right, there's no African American saying, okay, I got HIV. So therefore, every time it's publicized or you see it on the news, it's always a white person, a white gay man mostly, that's coming out or disclosing his status. We as African Americans think that we have to keep it hid if we got it, rather than, you know.
But now there's a danger, it seems to me, and I think we've, and this is what I know about the disease, that there's a danger that it can progress much faster if you ignore it. Is that what we're saying?
Well, HIV is a very individual virus, and it affects everybody differently. And HIV comes in many strains, and no one knows what strain is what. So you may have a strain that does you know, go fast, or you know, or you may have a strain that's very not aggressive, inaggressive rather, that moves slowly. But what happens is a lot of people think, for instance, the case with Easy Z, the rapper. 1 week you heard he had it, the next week he was dead. Well, what people don't know, he probably had it for several years. And, you know, HIV is a very tricky virus as well. You know, you may get it this year, and it may take 10, 15 years before you show any signs or symptoms of having HIV, okay? That doesn't mean that the virus in and of itself is not actively moving and progressing, and the disease is not progressing, but it's...
But you don't find any symptoms, and if you don't find any symptoms, the idea is that maybe you don't have it. Is that
right, absolutely. And there's only one way you can tell if you have HIV, and that is to get tested. And that's one of the things we at StreetWorks do. We have a grant to aggressively to find those who are infected and let them know that they're infected. And the way we do that is through oral the oral mucosal testing. So we don't draw any blood. So when we're out doing street outreach at night, we can test them right there on the site, right, you know, as we encounter them.
So you can actually deliver this test outside of a syringe.
Absolutely.
You can do an oral test.
And we do an oral swab in between the cheek and gum, and we can have the results in 2 days. And that's another asset. No, if a person don't have to go to traditional 2 weeks from testing time to time of getting the results.
And of course, Mr. Crowder, we're coming to the end of this first segment of the show now. When we come back, we're going to have 8 minutes. And what I want you to do is to talk about StreetWorks. I think you've indicated that you're located in what you consider a high-risk area for HIV, AIDS, and I'm sure that there are some of the experiences that you can tell us that will be revealing in terms of how people are reacting to this disease and some of the things that are happening to them. And of course, we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break. Talking to Mr. Ron Crowder.